It has been hours since the trial started. Your breath is heavy and makes thick smoke on the cold air. As you come across another generator, one you need to repair, at the behest of the twisted being called the Entity. You have not heard the heartbeat of whatever monster you must stare down this time. You have heard the faint screams of your friends. Who could it be? As the sparks fly from the wires touching, you see, out of the corner of your eye, a slight shimmer. Your head turns and your neck hurts as you let go of the wires. The fire from a nearby barrel crackles, and the haze above the flames makes you relax. Until the sound of a haunting bell rings out, and before you can react, you feel the sharp blade across your back as you fall face first into the dirt. And you know a hook is the fate that awaits you. The Wraith has taken another victim. The Wraith is one of 3 original killers that came with the launch of Dead by Daylight. From a bygone era where Survivor was the most overpowered thing this side of the ASIM genre, there were like 4 maps and the term looping hadn't even been conceived of yet. Brand new parts still instantly repaired generators for some reason, and the game had not yet built a massive player base hell-bent on slinging shit at each other and continuing to rage queue into a game they supposedly hate. The invisible tracking killer filled a niche in the original 3. He was meant to be the middle ground. While Trapper was slow and methodical and Billy was fast and on a permanent cocaine high, Wraith was able to zip around while invisible and then come out of invisibility to be slow just like the Trapper. Before the decision to work on this analysis, I had perhaps 20 games of Wraith under my belt, if that. And the reason for this is that I find the Wraith to be so unbelievably boring to play. Hit Bell, hit Survivor, hit Bell, hit Survivor. It's a constant brainless loop of gameplay, but I was wondering if my opinion had changed, if I gave Wraith a good to honest try, so, just like the Trapper, I played around 4 days of him, took notes, and put together an entire breakdown of the character, my feelings about him, what I'd change, what I like regarding everything about him, including lore, themes, power, gameplay, and more. Check your screen now or the description for time codes for each section, and let's hop right into Philip Ojomo, otherwise known as the Wraith. An endless night, full of the smell of death, decay, and kerosene. The only light is the tall flames that wrap around the corpse of everyone you've ever known and loved. For Philip Ojomo, a young Nigerian boy, this was a daily life. The lore of the Wraith is interesting. It's certainly far more in-depth than that of Trapper's. For one, it has far longer entries, but for 2, they actually attempted to build a somewhat coherent past. Where Trapper's lore entry was a small collection of memories slightly detailing a short bit of his childhood, Phillips talks about this part of his childhood as if it was over the course of years. The writers very clearly hid the amount of time that passes, with subtle nods of the maturing of Philip. It goes from him and his grandmother, skips to him traveling from village to village before meeting a motherly figure named Funanya and witnessing her subsequent death. Philip only knows death throughout this part of his life, and the theme of angels and forgiveness is pretty common throughout the tome. What I like is Philip is almost brought to the side of forgiveness by Funanya before she too is ripped from his arms, and he goes from the angel of mercy, staying with her in her last moments, to the angel of death, killing one of the killing crews responsible for the mass slaughter of his people. What truly interests me, however, is the stark contrast between his childhood and how he ended up a scrapyard worker in the States. How did he make it over there? What I do like is the tome sets up Philip's distinct hatred for people who profit from murder. This covers the very bizarre last line of his initial lore. Ojomo snapped and went ballistic. He threw his boss in the crusher and let it slowly compress. As the head stuck out, Ojomo grabbed it and pulled the head and spine out of the body. Then he left and was never seen again. The entire reason for him suddenly going crazy and killing his boss is because not only did his boss admit to profiting from the death of others, but also he had made Philip complicit.
There's a theory among the community called the white eyes theory. It basically goes like this. Killers with white eyes are being shown the visage of people who wronged them, and that's why they kill the survivors. The reason this theory is even a thing is because some killers being killers makes no logical sense. Philip would never harm an innocent, and so the entity shows him visions of the killing crews and maybe even his boss. There's a mini tome story I found called The Bell from Hell, and it talks about a couple of teenagers who break into a scrapyard where Philip used to work. They find Philip's old bell from his childhood and they ring it. Ringing it transports them to the entity's realm, possibly in the middle of a trial, and there the Wraith kills both of them. The bell from his childhood is a sound that enrages him, it seems, and it's a reminder of his blunder in getting Fununya killed. There's also the possibility that the entity fueled Philip's mind when he was younger. There's a lot of talks of black fog in the tome, implying that the entity was always watching Philip. It's even possible the entity was the one who caused the mass slaughter, although, in case this is based off actual historical events, I don't want to go that far. As I find it incredibly disrespectful to try to explain away real historical events with fictional cosmic beings, it's something that I just don't really enjoy the thought of. So I'm not, like I said, I won't go that far, but that is kind of seems to be what they're hinting at. But the night Philip decided to light the sleeping killing crew on fire, we see in the video as the features he would one day come to possess as the Wraith make their way onto his face. I think the entity marked him then and there, and waited for its moment when Philip would be the man he would need to become one of the killers. As far as the scrapyard bit goes, it's still, like I said, kind of weird. Basically, Philip just gets a job day in, day out, crushing cars over and over again. But then his boss comes up and is like, oh yeah, by the way, that body you found that you're freaking out about, I put one in every single car you crush. What the fuck do you mean? Like, there's just so many people being mass murdered a day that it's just, like, common for people to be tossed in cars to be crushed and whatnot. It just seems really weird. And I think that the initial paragraph phrasing that they had when the original lore came out was just something they threw together really quickly. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the themes and the map and everything in a little bit, but I just don't really understand this bit, because it's like, at that rate, you're telling me you've had Philip crushing like 10 bodies a day, like minimum. I don't know if any of you have ever worked in a scrapyard. I haven't, but I have friends that have, and like, you crush a lot of cars in a not a scrapyard, but in a wreckage yard. You crush a lot of cars every day. Like, it doesn't take long to crush them in those machines. So you're doing 10 to 15, maybe 20 a day. You're saying every car had a body in it? I don't know about that one. Overall, I give the Wraith's lore a 3.5 out of 5. There's still some unanswered questions I'd like to see answered at some point, but it is more fleshed out, coherent, and engaging than Trappers by a mile.
If you're a fan of audio horror stories, then check out my second channel, where I write, voice, and produce my own original stories, released every single Sunday, so you can go to bed with your creeps at night. Link is in the description.
I want to start this section by saying I enjoy the weapon design of the character this time around. I also like the thematics of the ringing bell to come in and out of stealth. It's as if Wraith is calling out his inner anger and sadness to channel the power. The way Wraith stands is also in line with the angel motif the lore so diligently pointed towards. The way his neck hangs to one side and his shoulders are wide and imposing, as if wings are attempting to escape his back. Now, if only I could figure out where the fuck invisibility came from. Wraith's backstory seems far more like his power would be fire-related. Well, at the time it was made, yes, I get it. Let's pretend for a moment, however, that we are pointing out things that should be changed about the character, and I know realistically, drastically changing the character's power is never a good idea. But thematically, the only thing I can think of for why this killer goes invisible is possibly that's how he feels after watching the countless of his people slaughtered time and time again, only for him to narrowly escape. The Mori is also ungodly boring. Like Trapper, it's an early Mori that for some reason hasn't received an update. I'd personally like to see the survivor attempt to get up and run, only for them to get cut off. Then, as he rings his bell and slowly uncloaks, the survivor gets engulfed in flames as the ringing gets louder and louder. However, one incredibly cool theme I especially like is the way the add-ons work. If we follow Trapper logic, they'd all just be some kind of handle or bell, but no, they are actually symbols he stamps onto the bell. Each symbol does something different. There are 2 handle add-ons, but there's only 2, so the theme of him using Nigerian folklore as add-ons is pretty fucking cool. Perk-wise, however, I'm just kind of confused, and this is where I actually get to talk about how convoluted Wraith's themes actually are. So let's go down the list, shall we? We have an Angel of Death aesthetic, who goes invisible, whose home turf is a scrapyard, whose add-ons utilize Nigerian folklore, whose perks make him some sort of hunter. And this is the core issue with Wraith thematically. He's all over the fucking place. The perks paint Wraith as some sort of silent predator. He can see blood pools and scratch marks easier and more consistent, and Shadowborn represents him being enraged at being blinded, his eyesight seeming to be his greatest asset. I'll talk about reworking the perks later on in this video because gameplay-wise they are fucking atrocious, but for now, the main concern is the chaos of Wraith's themes. You see, Wraith seems to be a character no one at Behavior seems to know what they wanted from him. If I'm to understand correctly, this stems from him not being one of the original 3 killers in conception. It was apparently made aware to Behavior pre-launch that they would be able to get the Myers license, and so the original killer in Wraith's spot, named Bob by a developer on Twitter, was dropped as it was supposed to be an homage to Myers, and they didn't want to release duplicate killers. But then they got Bella from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so in any case, when you take that into account, the mess of themes starts to kind of make sense. Wraith was originally probably going to be a Predator homage, more than likely before he had to have his backstory hastily shoved into Bob's backstory, and his visual design had to suddenly make sense for the thing that was going on. So we ended up with a well-crafted killer with a confusing initial backstory that doesn't match the expanded backstory, and ends up feeling more like a pile of mismatched Legos than a carefully constructed and thematic killer. For themes, I'm going to give Behavior a 2.7 out of 5 because it's just one big tangled mess that really frustrates me to try to figure out. I don't know what Wraith is supposed to be, and that makes me irritated. Wraith's cosmetics are actually very good. Unlike Trapper, where minimal effort was put in to make the character look different from the base iteration, Wraith has a lot of options to make each and every outfit feel like a different Wraith. At least in the purple category, but you know, that's okay, that's what purples are for. They all paint the Wraith in a slightly different light, bringing different interpretations of this Angel of Death or Avenging Spirit motif to the character. Some are just silly like the cat skin, but hey, I doubt throughout this series I'm going to find even one killer with a perfect line of cosmetics. 4.2 out of 5. Good job, Behavior. I write this section on day 4 of my week of Wraith, and it ended on day 4. I am fully prepared to say that there is no single more insufferable killer to play in this entire fucking game. I doubt I can be proven wrong. He's not as bad, clunky, or even brainless as other killers. He is just more insufferable because he is unapologetically fucking boring. The Wraith has no skill expression. He has no text, no variety, no satisfying movement. For as awful as the Trapper was, I at the least get a dopamine hit from landing a trap. There's nothing the Wraith provides as a form of entertainment, except maybe his kick speed build, but that's add-on specific, and even that novelty wears off after like 2 games with it. The Wraith's power is the Wailing Bell. You start the trial off invisible. While invisible, you move at 6 meters as opposed to 4.6. You retain collision, and you can kick objects, vault windows, open lockers, and snuff totems while invisible. While cloaked, survivors outside 20 meters cannot see you. Survivors inside 20 meters can see a slight shimmer. While cloaked, hold right click to uncloak, hitting the bell in the process. The bell has an omnidirectional sound within 24 meters, and a whoosh sound can be heard 40 meters out, allowing survivors to basically pinpoint your location at any time. Uncloaking takes 3 seconds, and you move at a pathetic 1.6 meters a second while uncloaking, and then you get an equally pathetic 150% movement speed for 1 second after the uncloak. This is done in an attempt to try to make up for the lost time that you had while uncloaking. So everything seems pretty straightforward. And it is. And that's part of the problem. There is nothing to the Wraith. Wraith has simultaneously the shortest skill floor and skill ceiling within the game. There is nothing to this character, and it leaves him feeling empty and unappealing. The major issue is, despite the map presence he has with his cloaked speed, he's at the end of the day a mediocre M1 killer with nothing to help him. The post-cloak speed boost is bad, over before you know it, and feels unsatisfying and worthless, kind of like the first time I ever had sex, and I'll never forgive Bobby Hillweather for it. But the point is that it leaves him feeling helpless. There's supposed to be some sort of tech with the speed boost allowing you to lunge around short loops at great speed, but the issue is the survivors know you're uncloaking, and they know which way you're coming from because of the red stain. On top of that, if the survivors have any sort of sense, they will just take the 3 seconds that you're banging your bell to leave the loop. I played around a lot with add-ons, tried to find any combination I could to try to alleviate this major issue, but I couldn't. Even with double uncloak speed add-ons, I still was seeing survivors get free distance. A big problem isn't even with the Wraith himself, but with the amount of lights and sprint bursts that litter this game. There's also the M1 killer problem that plagues every M1 killer, where you just greatly suffer at windows and pallets. And don't even think about trying to body block windows, because you will fail most of the time. Every time I'd go for a window body block to uncloak, they'd magically phase through me or find a small crack in between me and the wall a fucking mouse couldn't squeeze through and manage to slip in there to vault a window. With the mangled nerf, even Wraith's hit and run playstyle is kind of dead. This used to be the hit and run killer, but now with sloppy dead on arrival, he can't even force survivors into the amount of slowdown needed for him to get his full value. So now you're stuck injuring 1 or 2 people before having to commit to chases and watch your injuries get healed right the fuck up anyway, so all your pressure vanishes into the ether. With that in mind, here are some changes. 1. Post-uncloak speed should be 2 seconds instead of 1. This will actually allow the Wraith to catch up to survivors for once in his pathetic life. 2. Wraith can grab survivors off gens and injured survivors from windows while cloaked. You may think that's too powerful, but I'd argue that it's fairly easy to spot Wraith if you're paying attention, and it's no different from Pig or Ghostface or even Nurse being able to do the same. Besides, the grab mechanic doesn't work half the time anyway, so I don't think you should be worried about it anyway. 3. Wraith should gain a 20% bonus to kicking and vaulting while cloaked as a base kit. He currently has a green add-on that adds 40% and a purple that adds 60%, so I think 20% base kit wouldn't be that unfair. It gives him anti-pallet, lets him build gen kicking builds without wasting add-on slots, and it'll be fucking funny with add-ons. And finally, 4. Wraith should be able to pick up survivors while cloaked and stay cloaked. Will this improve his gameplay at all? No, but it will be fucking hilarious and might actually give you a reason to play this fucking killer. At the end of the day, Wraith is very similar to Trapper, where the wins feel empty because you know in the back of your mind it was the mistakes of survivors that caused wins and not your own gameplay, and losses feel helpless for much of the same reason. For power and gameplay, I give behavior a 0.5 out of 5, with the literal only redeeming quality being the 6.0 cloaked movement speed, and even that isn't satisfying. Fuck this killer, fuck his power, and fuck Keemstar for completely unrelated reasons. May you burn in hell, you uncharismatic, misinformation-spreading, bigoted fuckhead. And also, Wraith sucks. If you've been missing streams and want to see live gameplay, then go ahead and check out my YouTube channel, The Kaiser VODs, where I upload every game that I play in multi-hour compilations. We also have a collection of short compilations of clips from stream. We'll see you over there. Link is in the description. To complement Wraith's abhorrent gameplay, we have some of, if not the worst set of perks in the game for any killer. I'm not kidding when I say every single one of these are worthless. They have no use, no place in the game. There's no point to any of them. So let's attempt to fix them. Bloodhound makes blood pools glow bright red and leaves them on the ground for 2, 3, or 4 seconds longer than normal. Sound the alarms! The next meta perk is showing up on our doorstep! Instead, Bloodhound, while still making blood pools glow, now makes survivors scream in intervals of 45, 40, and 35 seconds while injured. This would end up replacing the mangled effect as the you need to heal perk. If survivors don't heal, they will keep screaming. I don't think they need to also show the location because that might be a bit too far, but the screaming should stay. And I do think the perk should pop up for survivors, letting them know why they are screaming. Predator. Scratch marks appear slightly, moderately, and considerably closer together. Instead, I want you guys to cast your minds back to my 5 new status effects video. Here's what I propose instead. While within your terror radius and injured, survivors become panicked for 15 seconds. This effect can only trigger every 35, 30, or 25 seconds when a survivor enters your terror radius. If you haven't seen my video, first off, how dare you, and second off, the panic status effect is a debuff that causes survivors to leave scratch marks even when walking. And finally, Shadowborn. When blinded, you gain 6, 8, and 10% haste for 10 seconds. Worthless. Most of the time, by the time the blind is over, you've finished whatever animation you're locked into, you basically have no time left, and you've probably lost where the survivors went. So instead, I propose that Shadowborn lets you start the trial undetectable for 9, 10, or 11 seconds, and anytime undetectable would end, you are undetectable for an additional 5 seconds. For the perks design, I give behavior a 0 out of 5. These perks are truly worthless, and I could not imagine using any of them unless I am required to. Would you believe me that I wouldn't change anything about Wraith's add-ons? It's not that there aren't bad ones, it's just that the bad ones don't necessarily need changing. Out of everything I've shit on this character for, I truly believe from the bottom of my heart that he has the most balanced add-on spread of the cast. He's got add-ons that add numbers, ones that change the power fundamentally, ones that provide cool bonus effects. He even has his meme add-on, which makes the power worse for more blood points. Fundamentally, this is the most well-designed spread available, and I think bad add-ons on a character are necessary. Hell, they even kept the hemorrhage and mangled effects together and out of the purple. So yeah. Let's talk about them real quick. Brown add-ons. The Beast, Soot, is Wraith's meme add-on, making it to where you are no longer undetectable while cloaked and gain more blood points for using the power. Power level, bad, obviously. Meme perk inclusion, good. The Ghost, Soot, grants an additional 6 seconds of undetectable when you uncloak yourself. This is actually paired extremely well with the Silent Bell add-on as it allows you to mind game far easier and is actually S tier in my opinion. The Hound, Soot. Okay, I'm just going to stop saying the suffix of each add-on. Real quick, each add-on of each color has their own suffix to match the color. Brown is soot, yellow is mud, green is white, confusingly, and purple is blood. The reason for this is so they may keep each class of add-on with the same name but a different suffix. Shadow Dance makes you do actions quicker while cloaked, Swift Hunt reduces uncloak speed, Windstorm makes you move faster, and so on. So from now on, I'm just going to say the name and you can imagine the suffix name, okay? Okay. So the Hound add-on makes blood pools glow. This is worthless. The Serpent. Performing the break action uncloaks you automatically. This is also shit. The brown add-ons follow my favorite philosophy of add-on design, weird effects over numbers and debuffs. This unfortunately disappears quickly, but hey, credit where credit is due. Yellow add-ons, or the mud category. Blind Warrior. When hitting a survivor with a surprise attack, by the way, is an attack done within 5 seconds of uncloaking, will cause blindness for 60 seconds. The issue with this is, as I've stated in the past, that blindness is pretty worthless status effect on survivors. It's got its very niche usage, but it's almost never worth running, and equally so, this add-on also has no place in your loadout. Blink. Reduces the amount of time it takes you to cloak by 40%. Now, cloaking takes 1.5 seconds. It's very fast, and because you can't really do anything while cloaked, you are never going to need increased cloaking speed. Maybe in my reworked world it would be good, but not here. Swift Hunt reduces uncloaking time by 8%. This is one of the more important add-ons, although the more used combo will be white and blood versions of this add-on. It still sits very high because it helps mitigate that god-awful amount of distance you lose from uncloaking. Windstorm. Increase your movement speed while cloaked by 5%. I originally thought this was one of the best add-ons for him, and while it is good because it increases his map presence, it's not as good as I originally thought, although you can put this class of add-ons on for a cheeky Pentimento build with Wraith and it works pretty well. But still, the Windstorm class of add-ons sits kind of low on the tiers. Bone Clapper, the only yellow add-on to not have a suffix. The Bone Clapper makes it to where survivors cannot discern the direction or distance of the bell. This basically makes it to where the bell goes from stereo to mono. For my deaf ass, it makes no difference, but for the average player, it can possibly confuse, but you're better off with a silent bell. Green add-ons, or the white category. Again, confusingly enough. Blind Warrior. Ironically, this is the Mangled and Hemorrhage add-on, and like I said earlier, the fact that it's green and not purple and combines both effects is a big plus. Unfortunately, that good fortune is ruined by the fact that it's Mangled and Hemorrhage, which now sucks as a status effects, and you're better off just equipping literally anything else. I only put it in C tier because it is better than nothing, but god damn it, it is not much better. Blink reduces cloaking time by 60%. Same as before, this isn't really an effect you need, as you can't do much while cloaked. Shadow Dance increases the break and bulk action speeds while cloaked by 40%. This effect is good for gen kicking and pallet shredding builds. So good, in fact, it uniquely works with those builds, and I highly recommend it for either one. In fact, when I have archives to kick pallets, this Wraith build is one of my go-tos for this add-on class, and it alone. Swift Hunt reduces uncloaking time by 10%. Second verse, same as the first, the best class of add-ons for Wraith by far, as it helps mitigate his biggest weakness. Windstorm moves 7% faster while cloaked. Same as before, cool, but only used in one cheeky Pentimento build, and that's it. Purple add-ons, or the blood category. All-seeing. See the auras of all survivors in 8 meters while you're cloaked. If you have survivors who get alerted to your presence super early, you can use this to find survivors on nearby gens, but if you think you're going to use this for mind game advantage, you're sorely mistaken. Remember, you can't do anything while cloaked, and becoming uncloaked takes 3 seconds. It can synergize with the Silent Bell Eerie add-on, but I'd much rather use the brown as synergy over this one. Shadow Dance, 60% break and vault actions for this one. You know the drill by now. In fact, I'm just going to give you numbers for the next two because I don't feel like repeating myself and I'm running out of ways to say I've spoken on this already. Swift Hunt, 12% less time to uncloak. Windstorm, 9% faster while cloaked. Iridescent add-ons, or the Spirit category. All-Seeing. This add-on allows you to see the progress of generators based off intensity of their auras. This is hands down not only one of Wraith's best add-ons, but one of the best add-ons in the game. This add-on gives you massive amounts of info, and you have the map traversal to actually do something about it. Highly recommended. Coke's Combed Clapper silences the Wailing Bell. This is the best add-on in Wraith's arsenal. It gives him back his mind game potential. It allows you to uncloak nearby and jump survivors on generators before they can react. It's just so fucking good and almost necessary to use this dog shit of a character. In the end, I give Behavior a 5 out of 5 for add-on design. They are balanced, and that's more important than every add-on needing to be super duper S tier. While I'm not a fan of some of them, it is important that they exist. So good on you, Behavior. If I seem a little irritated during this section, please don't mind that. It's just that I had this section recorded already, and when I went to edit it, I noticed that like half of the audio was missing, and so now I have to re-record it. So I'm a tad frustrated, but please don't let that distract you. So this is the tier list of how well all of the killer perks in the game work with Wraith. This is a basic overhaul, or a basic, not overhaul, but this is a basic overview basically. So when you want to make builds with Wraith, this is what this section is for. Just like with the Trapper, these perks are being ranked based off how well they work with Wraith. Just because a perk ends up in the never use doesn't mean it's bad overall. Just because it ends up in the always use doesn't mean it's for every killer. These are specific to the Wraith and how well they work with Wraith. To go down the tiers, we have always use, which is basically you should really, if you're trying to win games with Wraith, if you're trying to solely win games with Wraith, these are perks you should never take out of your build. We have highly recommended, which is just a step down. These are still really, really good on Wraith, really, really top tier, and those are your replacements if you don't have any of the always use. The recommended is just basic perks that will do the job. They probably won't necessarily win you games, but they will do what you need them to do. The can use is like, I wouldn't, but it's not going to necessarily hurt you. The don't use if you don't have to is basically perks where I wouldn't use it unless you are like literally like a new player and you have nothing else, and that is just the only ones you can think of, and that's that. And then the never use, I never want to see these perks on your Wraith build. Ever. Ever. Most perks, most lists are going to go in an order. So the ones at the very top of the list are the ones I put the highest in that tier. But the never use category is not going to be in any order because I'm not going to take the time to do that. Because again, I should never see you using these. And I'm very sorry for the coughing. It's just, I've been talking all day and anyway, let's get this over with. I don't want to make this too long. Bitter Murmur, you have the map traversal to take advantage of the aura reading that Bitter Murmur gives you. Every time a generator is completed, every survivor's aura next to that generator is revealed. All generators get completed. All of the survivors' auras on the maps are revealed for 10 seconds. So I highly recommend that because you can take really good advantage of that. You're not going to be slugging a lot as the Wraith, so you should never be using Deerstalker. It is not you don't slug as the Wraith. You are a hit and run killer. You're meant to injure multiple people, but once you down someone, you need to pick them up and confirm them on the hook. Wraith spends most of his time undetectable, so we do not need to worry about any Terror Radius perks. All Terror Radius perks are going to end up in the never use category. Noed continues to be one of the best perks for any M1 killer, especially M1 killers like Wraith, where you don't really have a lot of pressure that you could be throwing around, so you're probably going to end up in the end game with more than one survivor alive a lot. So definitely highly recommend Noed. Hex Thrill of the Hunt, I wouldn't use it if you don't have to. While Hex perks can be really good on Wraith with his additional speed while cloaked add-ons, the big problem with Thrill of the Hunt is that there are just better options in its place, and we'll get to those later. Insidious is absolutely worthless, just cloak. Iron Grasp, you can use it, but unlike Trapper, you really don't have as much trouble confirming hooks as Trapper does. Trapper needed a lot of help because he's just very, very slow to even get started, while Wraith jumps into the action almost immediately. Monstrous Shrine is actually kind of underrated on Wraith. Not only does it provide you additional Scourge hooks in the basement, but Wraith can get very far away from the basement very quickly. So you can get outside of that 16 meter or 20 meter range, whichever one it is, very quickly and end up kicking in its additional effect. Shattered Hope is shit overall. Sloppy, you can use Sloppy. Unfortunately, as I discussed in the the RIP Sloppy video that came out a couple weeks ago, Sloppy Butcher just isn't worth running anymore because Mangled isn't worth running anymore. Spies from the Shadow is a pretty bad info perk, but it's not so bad that you can never use it. I just really, really would not recommend it. Unrelenting is something that you can use. I don't really, you really shouldn't, just because Unrelenting is just not a good perk in general. But if you're finding yourself whiffing a lot of your post-cloak shots, then hey, maybe this is the perk for you. Next up is Whispers. I've never liked Whispers. Also, here's a fun fact. I always thought that this was like an old lady. Like an old lady with the wind coming in, but this is actually supposed to be an ear. So that's, that's fun to learn. Agitation is always a good perk overall. Even though Wraith doesn't really need it, it's still a perk that's just good in general. Actually, you know what? We could probably put Agitation in the can use. Like I said, this is for Wraith specifically. So for Wraith specifically, you don't really need Agitation, but yeah. Brutal Strength is a perk I highly recommend. I actually put it very far up in the highly recommended because not only does it pair well with your cloak kicking add-ons, but it also is just great for an M1 killer to have some sort of anti-pallet power. So that's definitely good for the Wraith. Another Terror Radius perk, don't need it. All three of Wraith's perks are fucking dog shit, don't need them. Enduring is not bad. I really wouldn't run Enduring that often. A lot of people might say Enduring is really good on Wraith because when you get stunned while you're cloaked, instead of lasting 3-ish seconds. It lasts for 5. And so some people might try to use that to circumvent the additional stun that you take if you get stunned while cloaked. The problem with that is, and that's actually, I'm going to put it in the can use, because the problem with that is actually that you shouldn't be taking stuns while cloaked anyway. You should be respecting pallets while stunned. You should not be in the situation to get stunned while cloaked. So try to avoid that. Next up is Lightborn. Lightborn's always going to end up in the recommended slot along with Franklin's whenever I get to it, because it's a tech perk. If you're not aware or you didn't watch the Trapper video, tech perks are perks that can be slotted into your builds in order to circumvent what the survivors are bringing. So if you see flashlight, if you see 2 flashlights, bring Lightborn. If you see a bunch of medkits, bring Franklin's, that kind of thing. Tinkerers is great for information. You can definitely take advantage of that information. The undetectable effect is unnecessary, but hey, it's there for you to use. But because you can take advantage of the information, I definitely put Tinkerers in the recommended, because you have such good map traversal. Next up is Nurse's Calling. I don't really like Nurse's Calling in general. I can see why people might want to use it on Wraith, because you're undetectable, and so you can see where the survivors are healing, and you can try to get to that place to see them healing. But the problem is that it takes you 3 seconds to come out of cloak, so just because you can sneak up on them while they're healing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to take advantage of it. But, I mean, it's an interrupt, I guess, so, you know, that's... We'll put it at the bottom of recommended. I'll compromise. We'll put it at the bottom of recommended. Next up is Strider. Never liked Strider. Don't care about it. Thana is dog shit regardless. Dying Light is kind of crap. Don't use it. Play with your food actually isn't too bad. You can cloak to drop chase. So if you find the obsession and you really want to be a cheeky little motherfucker, you find the obsession, you start a chase with him, you go bong, bong, you drop chase, and all of a sudden you've got a free stack for free. Save the Best for Last is the quintessential M1 killer perk. Every time I do one of these for any M1 killer, I'm going to put Save the Best for Last on there. It's just so good on any M1 killer. There's no excuse to not use it. Devour Hope, I can highly recommend. Once again, as Wraith, you do have really good ways to protect your hexes. So you can go, you can hook somebody and then go pop over and check on your X totem, make sure it's doing okay, and then come around. And then once you start getting that haste effect as well as the insta down, it's just very, very strong. So hex builds are very good on Wraith. They're very, very good. For that reason, we're actually going to put Ruin in the highly recommended as well. Again, you can protect your totems very well with your map traversal, but as well, you are also able to chase people off of gens a lot, because once people see the shimmer, they get off of gens. They don't stay on gens when they see the shimmer, so because they tend to hop off of gens, it can get a lot of use, and especially since it's buff, it gets a lot of use. Next up is Third Seal. Even though you are a hit and run killer, you don't, unlike Legion or Plague, you don't have any way to keep the survivors injured for a long time, so I really wouldn't recommend Third Seal. I'd probably put it, now I'll put it right below Sloppy. I think that's a very good place for it. It's just one of those perks where you can use it because you're a hit and run killer, but because you don't have the tools necessary to keep people injured, it's not going to always be in your best interest. Next up is Monitor. It's another Terror Radius perk. You don't need it. Next up is Overcharge. Now, opposite the Trapper, gen kicking perks on Wraith are very, very good. So we're actually going to put Overcharge up here in the highly recommended. I'll probably put it above Brutal Strength. Because you can kick while cloaked, even though you don't get that additional kicking speed, you don't sacrifice any time by kicking gens. I mean, you do. You sacrifice the time it takes to kick the gen, but my point is that you don't have to uncloak to kick a gen, so you can speed up to a generator, chase people off of it, go bop, bop, kick it, and keep going. And because of that, gen kicking perks are generally going to be higher up in this tier list. Another Terror Radius perk, don't recommend it. All of Huntress perks are pretty ass. Even though you can protect hexes, Huntress Lullaby in general is just not that great. If you want to, you know, I'll put it in the don't use if you don't have to, just because, you know, hexes, you can protect them. Next up is Barbecue and Chili. Barbecue and Chili is a really good information perk for you, especially with your map traversal. You hook somebody, you turn around, you find the auras, you zoom over there while you're going bong, bong, you get the point. Next up is Franklin's, another tech perk. It's going to go right below Lightborn. I put Franklin's below, actually no, we'll put Franklin's above Lightborn. Franklin's is more useful than Lightborn in general because it targets all items, but it's the same thing. You can actually kind of put these as equals in my opinion. They're both good tech perks, both good to keep around. Next out is Knockout. Again, you're not going to be slugging very often, or you shouldn't be slugging at all, so we're just going to keep Knockout in the never use category. Blood Warden is very bad. You don't have a lot of in-game presence, so there's no reason to use in-game perks outside of one that I'm going to get to a little bit later. That's actually really good, but Blood Warden is not that one. Fire Up, same thing. You don't really need you don't really want to use in-game perks. I know I put Noed up here. Now that I think about it, there's actually two. I know I put Noed up here, but that is because Wraith is very similar to every other M1 killer, where it's very difficult for him to keep pressure out throughout the entire game. However, once you get to the end game, you don't have a lot of options, and the only options you have are Noed and one other. Again, I'll get to later. Next up is Make Your Choice. I actually do recommend Make Your Choice because you can get very far away from the generator very quickly. Or, I'm sorry, very far away from the hooks very quickly, and you can return to the hooks quickly. You can hook somebody, bong bong, zip off, wait for the scream, zip back, bong bong, hit the person who's exposed. Hangman's Trick is just trash in general. Don't use it. Surveillance is a good info perk for gen kicking purposes, so it's going to go here in the recommended. Bamboozle is going to be highly recommended, probably right above Brutal Strength, especially if you pair Bamboozle with your Volt Speed add-ons. It's just you quickly bamboozle a window, start doing the bong bong. They try to vault the window, they're not going to be able to, and because you can vault it so quickly, even without those add-ons, you can still vault while cloak. So you vault while cloak, block the window, maybe block a doorway, give them one way that they can actually go, start ringing your bell, and then you can stop survivors from leaving you. Terror Radius perk, not worth it. Pop Goes the Weasel, one of the best gen kicking perks in the game, and because you can take advantage of gen kicking perks better than most M1 killers, then Pop is definitely going to be there. Haunted Grounds, I can recommend Haunted Grounds. It's a hex perk, but it's a trap. It exposes do recommend it. We do recommend Spirit Fury just because if you build a pallet shredding build with the add-ons Brutal Strength, you might as well throw Spirit Fury in there so you can get a couple of cheeky hits with it. So yeah, we'll go ahead and put in the recommended. Next up is Discordance. I don't really like Discordance as an info perk as much as Ott seems to, but I'm going to put it in the bottom of recommended because it is still an info perk that you can capitalize on with your map traversal. Next up is Iron Maiden. You're just not going to use this. Most survivors are not getting in lockers that often. The expose hit does not help you. Yeah, sure, you can use it, I guess, but not. Just don't use it. You know what I mean? Next up is Mad Grit. It's a backpack build. I'm going to put it at the bottom of can use because you're an M1 killer and it's a backpack perk for M1 killers, but unless you're building a backpack build, I really just don't do it. Next up is Corrupt Intervention. You do not need that beginning game slowdown. You just don't, it's not necessary for you. You can move fast enough to get started. There are a lot of other perks in the game that give you early game pressure. This is just not worth it. Next up is Dark Devotion. While I said Terror Radius perks would go in the never use, Dark Devotion is still good because there's nothing wrong with becoming undetectable while you're uncloaked. So we're going to put Dark Devotion down here in the can use, but it's not good enough to be recommended, at least in my opinion. Next up is the Infectious Fright. This one is based off your Terror Radius, but you're going to be downing people while they're in your Terror Radius anyway. I'm going to put it at the bottom of can use just because Infectious Fright is generally not a good perk in general, but it can alert you to things like flashlight savers and stuff like that. Next up is Furtive Chase. While the undetectable aspect is not that great, the speed aspect of it is, so I'm going to put it at the bottom of recommended just for the haste effect that it gives. Next up is I'm All Ears. It helps with mind game potential, so I'll put it right below Sloppy, but it's not really one that I think you need in your build. I think that there's just better options for you. Thrilling Tremors is just a bad perk in general. I can put it at the bottom I'll put it above Corrupt, I think. Yeah, I'll put it above Corruptive, the don't use, you don't have to. It's just a bad info perk, a bad slowdown, but it is technically an info perk that you can capitalize on. Claustrophobia, when a gen finishes, all the windows on the map are blocked. This is not bad for M1 killers, but generally speaking, you don't want to rely on stuff that only powers up when the gens are finished. Next up is Mindbreaker. Because you're going to be chasing survivors off gens, it's very, because you're going to be chasing survivors off gens, and because it takes you so long to come out of your cloak, you're going to want to try to cancel out the lights and the sprint bursts and stuff like that. So this is just a very good perk all around to run in tandem with that. Surge is one of the best slowdown perks for M1 killers. Every time you down somebody with an M1 attack, it blows up the gen it blows up all gens in 28 meters for 8%, something like that, 28 or 32. I can never remember the exact number. Even though you're a hit and run killer, Blood Echo is still not one you're going to be using for a very similar reason to why you won't be using Third Seal that much. And it's because you can't keep people injured reliably. Next up is Nemesis. Survivor stuns you. They become the obsession. Their aura is revealed to you. Who gives a fuck? We'll put it at the bottom of can't use. Or don't use if you don't have to, I should say. Zenshin Tactics is just awful. You don't need it. You already have the information Zenshin Tactics can provide to you. You know what pallets have been broken and where, because you are the killer. If a pallet has been broken, you are the one that did it. Next up is Dead Man Switch, a pretty good slowdown. You're probably going to be using other slowdowns in regards to it. You're probably not going to be using the good old Pain Res DMS Grim Embrace combo if you are good at the game. But it's just because you're going to be using other things doesn't mean I still can't highly recommend it. Gearhead, because you're a hit and run killer, you can get more use out of Gearhead than other killers, but it's still not good enough for me to recommend, at least in my opinion. Retribution is an info perk you could technically take advantage of, but not good enough, in my opinion, to go any higher than don't use if you don't have to. I would actually put it probably above Thrill of the Hunt, honestly. Deathbound, survivor finishes healing, they scream, they become oblivious. Who gives a fuck? It's info. Okay, you know what? I'll put it at don't use if you don't have to because it's info. How about that? Force penance, you can technically continuous. Oh no, force penance is protection hit. Sorry, you don't interrupt heals with force penance. Forced penance is protection hit based, and it's very crap because the protection hit system is crap. So don't use force penance. Trail of Torment, we have Unforeseen now. Never use Trail of Torment. We have Unforeseen. I said this in my last video, and somebody was like, "Well, but Trail of Torment, what if people have Pyramid Head but they don't have Unknown?" Great point, except Pyramid Head costs real money and Unknown costs shards. So if you want Trail of Torment, just get Unforeseen instead. Next up is Dragon's Grip. It's technically not bad. Kick a gen. Survivor touches a gen within 30 seconds. They become exposed, but there's just other better gen kicking perks to go along with it. I'll put it above Furtive Chase, I think, in the recommended. Hex Blood Favor. This one's actually really, 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 really good. Because one, you can protect hexes, but two, most of the time survivors are not going to be dropping pallets until after you injure them because you get the initial lunge on them and you get the little injure. So after that, they can't drop pallets for like, I don't know, like 30 seconds or something, like 15 seconds, something like that. But they can't drop pallets for a while after you injure them. So this is good. Next up is Undying. This is a perk that only becomes recommended if you're running a Hex build. If you're not running a Hex build, it's in the never use, but that should be obvious by this point. Next up is Coup de Grace. Coup de Grace is not bad. I don't know if I'd put it too high, but because it's a very good M1 perk and because it's one of your catch-up tools, every time a generator is completed, you get 2 tokens. Use the tokens during a lunge, extend the lunge. It's still good. Next up is Hoarders. Who gives a fuck about Hoarders? Next up is Oppression. While it is a gen kicking perk, it is one of the worst gen kicking perks in the game. So I'm honestly just going to put you can use it, but just don't. Just don't. Crowd Control is a hex. Whenever a survivor vaults a window, it blocks that window. Just use Bamboozle, honestly. No Way Out. No Way Out is the second in-game perk I can recommend. If you're going to run No Way Out, run NoEd. That is very, very important. If you're going to run No Way Out, run NoEd so that you have your in-game power with in-game, so you have your in-game pressure with in-game slowdown. Okay? Okay. Starstruck. I actually don't know. Let me think about this one for a second. Bottom of recommended. So because you can catch up to survivors fairly fast, if you do manage to get somebody caught in your starstruck, you can go bong bong, zip over to them, bong bong, come out of it and go whop and knock somebody down. So yeah, I bottom of recommended. Very close to being can use, but bottom of recommended. I still think eruption is a good perk. Is it stupid powerful like it used to be? No, but I still think eruption is a good perk. So I'm going to put it in the highly recommended. Hysteria is trash, don't use it. Lethal Pursuer is good for early game pressure. I definitely put Lethal Pursuer at the very top of highly recommended. The only reason I don't put it in always use is because you need to put other aura reading stuff with it. So if you don't pair it with like barbecue and chili, for example, then it just doesn't get as much use as it should. But that's the only reason it's not an always use is because it has to be paired. It doesn't have to be, but it's a wasted perk slot if it's not paired with our other aura reading stuff. Next up is Deadlock. Very good slowdown for gen rushers, and as an M1 killer, you on average spend more time in chase than other killers. So this is very important to stop gen rushing. Highly recommend it. Plaything, I think, is one of the best perks on Wraith because, again, not only can you do hex builds really well, but also because this is always paired with this, which is one of your best perks. The only reason Plaything is in front of Pentimento is because Plaything is infinitely more useful than Pentimento by itself. But these two are going in the always use because this is a combo you can utilize well. Because you move so fast in your cloak speed, and because you have the add-ons that increase your speed while cloaked, you can, in essence, almost always get 4 to 5 stacks of Pentimento at one time. Almost always. And because of that, these go in the always use category. But again, they go in the always use category under the condition that you pair them together. Gift of Pain. I tried Gift of Pain for a few builds and I really wasn't that happy with it. So I'm going to put it in can use. Just because even though it got net buffed with the mangled changes, I still am not a big fan of it. Next up is Grim Embrace, one of the best gen slowdown perks in the game, and because you can zip away from hooks so fast, it picks up very, very quickly. You hook somebody, you go bong bong, you go boom, and it blocks the gens. You know how Grim Embrace works. Pain Resonance is one of the best slowdown perks in the game. I prefer Pop over Pain Resonance on Wraith, but either one of these can be in either place for you. Call of Brine is a very good info perk. We're going to put Call of Brine above Surveillance. Where's Surveillance at? Here. Call of Brine goes above Surveillance. I just like Call of Brine better than Surveillance. That's just me, though. Next up is Merciless Storm. Because you can chase survivors off of gens, if you find gens getting... Like, if you pair this with, say, Tinkerers, then you know, 70%. By the time you get over there, maybe it's 90%. You chase them off the gen. They miss the skill check. It gets blocked. It's a good time. Floods of Rage, I only would pair Floods of Rage if you're running Pain Resonance, in my opinion, but I can still put it at the bottom of recommended, above Undying. Now, I'd say Hex builds are better than Scourge Hook builds on Wraith, so we'll put it below Undying, but above Starstruck. Darkness Revealed is an info perk, but it's not a very good one for you. You really don't need to be searching lockers, so I'm going to put it in the don't use if you don't have to. Dissolution is trash, and it always has been. Fight me on that. Septic Touch is trash, and it always has been. I'm sure nobody's going to argue with me on that. This is fucking the Dead by Daylight community. Someone's going to argue with me. Awakened Awareness is not that great. You can use it, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Superior Anatomy is at the bottom of recommended, mostly because you really only need Bamboozle, but if you want to be really cheeky and build something where you vault windows in like literally a quarter of a second, then yeah, you can use Superior. Terminus. I actually put Terminus at the bottom of highly recommended. Because you don't have a lot of in-game power, but you are also a hit and run killer, Terminus unironically can be one of your saving graces. So I would definitely put it there. All right, we're almost there. Face the Darkness, because you don't have a terror radius like most of the time, I would actually put Face the Darkness pretty high because it gives you a lot of good information while you're cloaked. And because you're a hit and run killer, you're going to be constantly relighting the hex by injuring new people. So very, very good perk for you. Hubris is not that great. You could technically put it in your pallet shredding build, but I just don't think Hubris realistically should go in a pallet shredding build, so I'm definitely going to put Hubris down near the bottom. Nowhere to Hide is one of your greatest perks. It's going to go right below Lethal. It pairs with Lethal extremely well, but because, like I said, you kick gens while invisible, you run up to a generator, you chase people off, you kick it real quick, you find them, you zip over to them, you uncloak, you begin the chase. Game of Foot... I guess you could put it in a pallet kicking build. I really wouldn't recommend it, though, because you have to be chasing the obsession in order to use it. So I'm just going to put it at the bottom of recommended, but very, very barely. Very barely. Leverage is trash. Don't use it. Thwack. Top of can use. It's the same thing as Game of Foot. You can technically put it in your pallet shredding build, but it's not necessary. Oh, actually, no, you can't use Thwack because it's based off your terror radius. So yeah, fuck that. Forced Hesitation is technically really good. I wouldn't say so. Like I said, you're not slugging very often, but I also am not going to sit here and pretend like it's not something that can get some use. You know, you hit and run, you injure a couple of people, you down one of them, you hear, ah, you look over and you're like, aha, there you are. Well, you hear if you have infection fright, but you know what I mean. What I mean is that because you're injuring multiple people, this isn't necessarily a bad idea. I just don't think it's good enough to go in recommended. Genetic limits. Whenever someone finishes healing, they're exhausted. I just don't like genetic limits in general. Machine learning is actually not that bad of a gen kicking perk because you can kick gens and go from generator to generator, marking them very similar to something like Eruption. Machine learning actually isn't bad. If gens start getting completed under your watch and you've marked, you mark the generator that does get completed, then, you get that bonus haste effect, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Alien Instinct is shit. It always has been. Rapid Brutality is shit on Wraith. Listen to me. Mazem, I know you're watching this fucking video. I swear to fucking God, Mazem. Rapid Brutality is not good on Wraith. It's not good on Wraith. Ultimate Weapon. You don't have a terror radius most of the time. So no, Ultimate Weapon is not good on Wraith. Do not use it. Batteries included, you shouldn't be making it to the end game anyway, but in case you do, I can put batteries included in can use. I can actually put batteries included right below Gearhead, I think, just because, you're going to be zipping around the map anyway. Might as well get some bonus speed on it. Friends Till the End is very, very good on Wraith. I highly recommend it. I think that Friends to the End in general is just good for killers with good map traversal, so definitely you can use that. Two Can Play is unironically a good perk. On Wraith, though, I don't think it's that great, but it's not bad enough to where I'd say don't use it. After you vault a window, you gain haste. It's just not... I just don't like this perk in general. I don't think this perk is that great, so we're just going to leave it down there. This perk is also not good because it relies on survivors to miss skill checks, and you just don't want to use perks that rely on survivor mistakes. And then finally, Unforeseen. This is the only perk that has to do with a terror radius and undetectable I'll put in always use. Because you can kick gens and put your terror radius on the generators, you pull double duty by making survivors think you're in that area. And when you uncloak, you are undetectable for 30 seconds. So this can actually help with mind games. It can help keep survivors away from a gen that you don't want them to use and stuff like that. So I definitely will put that. I'm actually going to put Grim Embrace up here. And that is it. This is the final perk tier list for Wraith specifically. Hopefully when I get this in the editor, I don't get fucked this time. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and congratulations, you have made it to the end of the video. The conclusion is right after this, so I hope you guys enjoy that last couple of minutes. And yeah, let's get to the conclusion. The final score for the Wraith comes out to a 2.65 out of 5. While the character has really good lore, he suffers heavily in almost every other category. He's a miserable killer to play with no redeeming qualities. There's nothing that makes me go, yeah, let's play some Wraith. It's an endless dull cycle of hit Bell, hit Survivor, hit Bell, hit Survivor, hit Bell, kick Jin, hit Bell, hit Survivor, and while his add-ons are varied and interesting, they don't do anything with his fundamental issues, leading to an experience that never feels fresh and new. His power isn't satisfying, even on a base level to use, which for some equally bad or even worse killers doesn't hold true. He's not fun to play and not strong enough to justify ignoring the dullness of the character. Picking my 3 favorite things about the Wraith, it would be his lore, his add-on spread, and stance. The 3 worst things would be his core gameplay, his tangled mess of themes, and his perks. But that's all I have for you guys today. Please be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments down below. As always, I don't make these videos just to spout my opinions at you. I make them so that you can let me know what you think. And as always, a very big special thank you to my channel members listed on screen now. If you want to find out how to become a channel member and get awesome perks like seeing videos early, merch discount codes, and more, then please click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.